Former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte has taken over as Secretary General of NATO, using his first day as chief to voice strong support for Ukraine in its war against Russia.
We must deliver on the package agreed at the Washington summit. The command, the financial pledge, and Ukraine's irreversible path to membership. And we must sustain this support into the future, because Ukraine's rightful place is in NATO.
Mr. Rutte also sending a warning to China, calling it, quote, a decisive enabler of Russia's war in Ukraine. The shift in NATO leadership comes weeks ahead of the U.S. election. Mr. Rutte says he's happy to work with either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. All that despite the Republican candidate's previous criticism of the transatlantic security alliance. And we're joined by Alex Cadier live in Brussels. Alex, we have heard what Mr. Rutte is likely his direction in NATO. What more details can you offer us on where he will take this security alliance?
Well, what we've heard from the new Secretary General Mark Rutte here in NATO HQ just in the last few hours is very much continuity of the policies that Jens Stoltenberg has forged at the North Atlantic Alliance here over the last decade, looking at, of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That is the singular, most impactful event of the last few years for the NATO alliance. It has completely transformed what NATO stood for and what NATO was doing, moving away from small interventions like Afghanistan and Kosovo to now really rethinking the alliance's defense as a whole in Europe, making plans for an attack by Russia or an outside party. But with that comes, of course, the global implications of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You heard Mark Rutte there talking about China being an enabler of Russia's war, also saying that China cannot continue to fuel the largest conflict in Europe since the Second World War without having an impact on its interests and its reputation. Again, continuity there by Mark Rutte. Jens Stoltenberg had been putting more pressure on allies to be able to face what they see as an adversary or potential threat from Chinese influence, particularly when it comes to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Support for Ukraine will continue. We know that Mark Rutte, as Dutch Prime Minister, was very supportive. Just in the last few days, Dutch F-16s having a ceremonial flight over the Netherlands, retiring from the Dutch Air Force, now heading to Ukraine. That support will continue, but certainly those challenges becoming much more global for the next Secretary General of NATO.
Alex, Mr. Rutte also making it clear that he is happy to work with whoever wins the U.S. election, taking no sides there. So whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, how would this not taking any sides translate into actual practice when NATO needs to work with the United States?
Well, clearly NATO has to work with the United States. It's its biggest member, its biggest contributor, and really the biggest security guarantor that the NATO alliance has. Mark Rutte being very diplomatic, very careful in his language, saying that he had worked for Donald Trump for 4 years and saying that he was right for pushing us, being the European members of the NATO alliance, to spend more on defense. This is what we've heard from Donald Trump over and over again. The Europeans pay less, we pay more. It's a bad deal. Maybe we should pull out of NATO. Mark Rutte addressing that right off the bat, saying that he was right to push European members of NATO to pay more. And with 14 years experience as Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte is very well versed at negotiating with other European countries when it comes to budgets and finances. He's been doing that in the European Union context for 14 years. That is the kind of experience he will bring to the table. Of course, also addressing Kamala Harris, the other potential, perhaps less problematic president to be should she win, saying that she has a fantastic record as vice president and is a highly respected leader. Clearly, Mark Rutte feels like he can work with Donald Trump, he can work with Kamala Harris, and he can do the job in the years to come.
Oh, thanks, Alex Cadier joining us live there from Brussels.